Hey, how's it going everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I'm going to do a little bit of a tutorial on this elevator that I have made here for my new level, which is called Parking. Now, I've actually posted this entire thing, the elevator itself and the chips attached to it, right here on the Dreamiverse under my normal PSN name that I link to this YouTube account, which is Count Sockula. I will put it in the description if you're interested. But today I will be teaching you how to make this lovely elevator for our level here, starring this little character who I actually don't remember the name of, but who I will list down below as I did not make them, although I have spent quite a lot of effort refining this character and giving him a few new actions to do other things that you will see in later videos, but I don't want to give everything away. So the idea for this is that it's a simple elevator that when you get onto it as your played character or your possessed character, whoever's possessed by Imp, it will raise you to the top of the elevator, which in this case is right here on top of this lovely highway, and then it will require you to jump off first before you can then activate it again, so it doesn't just continuously go up and down. Now, obviously, this level is incomplete, so feel free to tear me apart in the comments if you want to in terms of how this is not polished yet, but I haven't polished it myself. But the final thing that this elevator does is also, if you accidentally activate it and fall off, you can then once it reaches the top, be standing somewhere around down here, and it will return and reset to the bottom. But if you enjoy this sort of tutorial, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this sort of thing. But generally, these aren't the types of videos that I do. Alright, so let's get started. So first off, you're going to get yourself a movable object. In this case, it is this lovely fence piece here that I found on the Dreamiverse, which coincidentally is used all around here for some different platforming segments, but honestly just reminded me a lot of Mario 64's platforms, and I like those a lot. You need that object, obviously, to elevate your character, but then from there, my first suggestion for most of these complicated things is to get out a microchip, which in this case is right here in the logic and processing, and looks like this little, well, microchip. And then to open that microchip, you're going to hold L1 and press X, and I do recommend the DualShock for working on logic. It's just a little bit easier in my opinion, but totally not needed. Make that microchip a little bit bigger because this is a bit of a complicated process, and then, like I said, I'm going to be basically recreating this, but I'm going to simplify some things because this is kind of my worksheet, and you can call this the actual test. We'll see how I do. But first, we're going to grab those two variables, and these are basically your two variables that are going to say when your object is, as you'll see with the labels here, at the bottom or at the top. And basically, when you take a variable like this, open up the settings by holding L1 and pressing square, and change the name of that variable. So for this one, we'll call it at top, and then for this one, we'll call it at bottom. These two things mean that these variables are now unique, and when we have variable modifiers in the future, they will reference these things specifically by name. And then you're going to want to take both of these minimum and maximum values and set to 0, and then set the max to 1. And obviously, not all of this is completely necessary. There are easier ways to do this, I'm sure that people will talk about in the comments down below. But again, this is how I found out how to do it, and more importantly, hopefully this can introduce you to some things, like I said, variables and variable modifiers. So at bottom and at top are there to tell your game when the elevator is at the bottom or at the top. You can see that since the elevator is connected to this circuit board and it's set at number 1, it's at the bottom. Now these two switches aren't necessary, and I'm going to actually remove them from this build, but you can have them there if you want a more visual representation, and also they can be very useful for things that you want to kind of quality assurance while you're going through this. And so I tend to use switches in some of my builds when I don't quite know how to do it, or when I'm figuring it out as I'm doing it, just so I can turn things off and on very quickly, and therefore test different things like keyframes and whether or not switches are working. But now that we've created our two variables for at bottom and at top, we're going to add these lovely AND switches. And they won't be explained right now. I will explain them as we add the AND parts. But they're important because these two AND switches will allow our mechanism to go up and go down as they are labeled here. So when these two AND switches are activated, meaning when all of their inputs are active at the same time, the elevator will go up or go down accordingly. We'll talk about what the other inputs are in a second, but for right now, just make sure that you have two AND switches with 3 inputs, and I believe that is right here. So definitely create 2 AND switches here. I'm going to just put them as 3 ports each so that when we're organizing our microchip as we go along, it's easier. And we're going to call the first one as I did over here, go up. I'm only reading off of that because I want to make sure I organize it correctly and in the most, like, sensible way, I guess you could call it. I don't know if I would call any of this sensible, but basically these are the two switches, like I said before, that will cause your elevator to go down or go up. Obviously they won't do it on their own, but when these are triggered, they will tell your elevator to do that. And so, to do that sort of thing, what we're going to do is we're going to create two timelines here for up and down. And these are going to be the animations of your actual elevator going up and going down. So, whereas these are the states of where your elevator is, and these are the triggers for it to go up and go down, this will be the animation that actually goes up or goes down. So we're going to create two of those here, and then we're going to edit the first one, and I believe I had it set to just do once. Yep. So we're going to set that to just go one time, so that when it's triggered it will only go once, and we'll do the same for this. And then we're going to label this one up, and we're going to label this one down. Now, like I said, I know there's a lot of other things over here, which I will briefly explain at the end why I removed them, but it's just a matter of working through things and partially being too lazy to normally remove all this stuff, because why would I? It's only a few extra things. So from there, we're going to go into the up switch, and we're going, or the up timeline rather, and we're going to go back into the animate section and add a keyframe. So this keyframe, if you've done any sort of keyframe tutorial so far, is going to be where our animation will begin. And so for right now, we're going to grab this. Now for this one, I think I want this to take about, let's say 8 seconds to go up. Let's see what I did for this. Did that make sense? You can just kind of play around with this and see what makes sense and it's moving too fast for your character and what's moving too slow for the character. In this case, I played around with it a bunch, so I can just check that 10 seconds is about a good time for this. So I'll set that there, and so this is going to be the end keyframe, where our platform is moving to, where our elevator is moving to. So for this, I'm then going to take the same thing, and I'm going to hold R2 to pull on it, and to make it go up very straight up, you could just hold L1 and then hold up, but as you can see here, this pipe, except it should be, I mean, I'm not really sure why it's not, but this happened the first time I did it too. This pipe should be straight, but for some reason it's not, so instead, just grab it and toss it over here. It doesn't matter how many times you grab it, as long as you're still in the same keyframe. So then we're going to head back down to the bottom here. Now we have our two keyframes, that's the hard part, and after that, you're going to drag the timeline. Doesn't have to be right at the end, but definitely make sure that it's past the keyframe. Don't do it like this, where the keyframe is showing a little dotted line on one side, because I found that to be slightly glitchy. I can't quite figure out why, but it is. So instead, just leave it a little bit after, not too much, but enough that the keyframe is fully visible and you can see some blue here to the right. Then we're going to change the blend, and obviously you could do this by going into the settings of the keyframe by holding L1 and pressing square. They're right there. But there's a shortcut. If you hold L1 and press X, you can change to whatever blend you want. And I found for this sort of elevator, for my tastes, the S blend seems to be the best. So at the beginning, when you jump on, it'll start off slow, then it'll speed up, and then it'll slow down when it gets to the top. And that's almost everything, but what's really important here is that you turn off the smoothing. Now, it might seem a little bit weird because you want it to be smooth, but smoothing does a lot more than it sounds like it will do, and has messed up so many of my animations, so I guess I'm somewhat anti-smoothing in general. But then I'm going to actually shrink this timeline a little bit just so I can see it better on my screen, which if you didn't know you can do that, you can with any sort of menu. Kind of hold it and shrink it, and it will shrink anything that's open from it, which is great if you are working with a bunch of different logic at once. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, for the down, which again we're going to open by holding L1 and pressing X. I realize it just sounded like a weird computer saying we're going to do this, but well, there you go. And then we're going to take this keyframe that is the starting point, and because it's the opposite, we're going to put this at the ending point. We're going to take this keyframe from the ending point, we're going to place it here at the starting point. And then same thing, again, these don't have to be perfectly timed, but make sure that this is slightly away from the second keyframe. Hold L1 and press X to switch to the correct blend that you have chosen, and then you're good. And both of these animations are created. It's that easy. Another thing I forgot to mention that I'm editing right now is make sure that both of your timelines, I'll make them smaller so you can see this a little bit better, make sure that both of your timelines have the ladder keyframe And I do the former too, not sure if it's necessary, but make sure it's both set to keep changes. This way there's not a bit of a stutter right at the end. Now, it's not totally done yet. It's not anywhere near done yet, because now is when we get into the fun part. Now, for the few extras here, as you can see down here, we'll be getting to that in a minute, and that's going to be why there's another input here. But for right now, what you need to do is take the variable that's your at bottom one and connect it to the b of go up. And so what this means is that for the go up animation to activate, for this one to activate, you're going to need the state of the platform to be at the bottom. Obviously, if it's at the bottom, it can go up. If it's at the top, it can't go up anymore. That would make any sense. So we're going to connect that there, and then we're going to take the at top one and do the same thing, but for the other one. In this case, it will be for go down. And so we're going to take the at top one, which is required for the platform to go down, because if it's at the top and it needs to go anywhere, it's only going to be able to go down. Simple. And then we're going to take the two outputs of this AND switch, and we're going to connect them to two variable modifiers. And so these variable modifiers are basically going to tell it that when you activate the go up or go down modifier, it's no longer going to be at the top or at the bottom. And so let's take some variable modifiers, and again, they're in the same section as what we've been working on so far. We're going to take two of those, and I'll place them down here for now, but we can rearrange in a second. And I know that I'm actually going to need two more, so go ahead and place 4 of them down. And so we're going to label them as follows: at top, at bottom, and we're going to create 2 of each. And so what I mean by this whole title being super important of these and why we change this is because these variable modifiers are going to reference those. So for this one, you can go in here and type it out directly. Don't worry about this space at the end, by the way. Media Molecule does delete spaces at the ends of words, so if you accidentally do that, or Sony Audio corrects you to do that, it's fine. But you can also just hit down on the D-pad to go through them. And so let's call this one at bottom. Let's call this one at bottom. And let's call this one at top. And we'll call this one at top. Now, obviously, you see things moving over here because I already have these variables. But what we want to do from there is connect the switches as they would make sense. So, for example, the go up is going to connect to one of the at bottom modifiers because it's going to change this variable to be no longer the bottom once you activate go up. And so I'll connect it to, let's connect it to the first one. Let's see, yeah, let's connect this one for go up to the first one to modify at bottom. And then we're going to take this one and set it to modify the one that's called at top. Now, I want to make a small correction to what I said. Hopefully I can plonk this in there, and then if I do, then you're probably watching this at the right time. But you want to make sure, and this is something I did the first time I did this by mistake, that these chords, any chords leading into the variable modifiers are, like these ones are, leading into the power switch, not leading into the number operational value. So make sure that if you accidentally do that, you grab that switch and plug it into the power of it. It'll be easier to see if you're not right on top of it, but you can see that that's plugged into there now. You want to grab this, which you can move chords, by the way, by holding R2. Make sure it's plugged into the power of the right one here, which again, you can check by moving it over slightly, making sure it's plugged into the right one. Do that, and then from there, let me pull this back a little bit, we're going to connect the AND switch for go up to the up animation and the AND switch for go down to the down animation. Makes sense, right? So go up goes here, and go down goes here. So now what we're going to do, and I already actually have one here, so I'm not going to do it again, but you're going to head into here, into the gadget section, go to the trigger zone, and place one down, just like this. And you want to make sure that either you're in the group of your object that's going to be moving, the elevator itself, or that you just grab one and hold L1, and that will surface snap it and stick it to whatever you want it to. So in this case, we're sticking it to the elevator. Make sure it is stuck to it, and you will know that in the future. I'll tell you how to check, because if you don't, it will mess up and it will stay in place, and then it won't trigger when anybody jumps on there. So you want this trigger zone to be a square or whatever shape you want it to be, and basically any character that enters this zone is going to move the elevator up. So you want to make sure that it's on top of your elevator and or encompasses the section that you want the character to activate the elevator with. Now I have it set right now to all controller sensors. Generally you probably want to set it to possess controller sensors, and this is just so it's always the character that you are playing that will activate these. But I have it set to this just because sometimes it's easier when you're kind of working through things to hit play and just place the character here like that, and it should activate if you have all controller sensors linked. But again, it's sort of finicky right now because I have two things referencing the same elevator. But once you have that down, you're going to take the cord leading out of that, which for you, there won't be one because you don't have two circuit boards. And then what I like to do is, instead of just plugging it right into where it goes, I like to take one of these nodes from over here to keep organization going well, and I'll kind of extend this way. And I'm going to place this up here, and I'm going to edit it and change the node to be called character detected. And I think I already typed it in here, so it should be fine. And there's no need to change the name of this. It's, again, just for organization. So once you have that set to whatever you want it to be called for whatever makes sense, you can then plug this trigger zone right into there. And then instead of having to constantly go back to that trigger zone and go inside that little hovel that I've created, you can just reference the microchip and know that this is the trigger zone. And all this is here for, this node, is a pass-through. So all it's going to do is take the cord from where it came from, so in this case that trigger zone, and place it to whatever we want to. It's not needed, but it's a great organization technique. So moving from there, you can see it actually, it's right down here. We're going to connect that to one slot of both because we only want it to go up or down when there's a character that's standing on here. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to connect it to B. Yes, you can connect it and hold L1. When you hit X, it'll let you connect it to a second thing. I'm just not quite used to that yet because I'm so used to in Little Big Planet when it was automatic. Not a bad thing, just a different option, I suppose. And so from there, we're going to change up the variables a little bit. So for at bottom, this first one, and again, this is the one that you've connected your AND switch to. In this case, it's the one that you've connected. Oh, actually, is this one connected by mistake? This should not be connected there. Oh wait, okay, so that's why that happened. I'm going to actually shift this up here so you can see that it's not connected to the at bottom one by mistake. And so we're going to take this variable modifier that's connected to the go up, and it's called at bottom. And so this is going to change this one right here. And we want that when it's set to go up, we want the at bottom one to be set, which is this one, to 0. So this is actually already set up. And then we want to do the same for the at top, set to 0. And from there, we want to change the other at bottom variable to set to 1. So this is basically going to be our on state. The second one, we can say set to 1. Once you have that set up, I can actually tell you what these are used for. So the point of these is to tell these variables when it's at the bottom, when it's at the top. We talked about that already. But for the second one, we want to make sure that when it's set to 1, it actually is at the bottom or at the top. So in this case, we're going to take this up timeline here, and we're going to go down to the on-end trigger. And so because this is the up timeline, we want the up value to be triggered. So in this case, this is at bottom. So when it goes up, it's going to reach the top. So we want that when it's at the end, it will trigger the at top variable to be 1, or true in this case. And then do the same for the down one. Take this lovely on-end trigger, which I wish we had had in Little Big Planet, and plug it right into the at bottom. So once it goes down and it reaches the bottom, it will change the at bottom one to 1. So finally, you're going to change the at bottom trigger to 1, and from there, we're going to do one more thing before we go on to our additions section. And so for the final thing, you want to make sure that when at bottom or at top are active, and therefore they're equal to 1, and these animations finish, that they have a keyframe to maintain. So in this case, this is the timeline for up. So that means that the first keyframe here is identical to the at bottom state. And so we're going to take that keyframe and just place it on there. And we're going to do the same for the at top keyframe, which is this one. And then I highly recommend you double check by holding L1 and pressing X, and you should be able to see where it is when this keyframe is active. Then you can hold L1 and press circle to get out of there, but be careful not to get out of the microchip. And then from there, because we know that's the at bottom one, and then let's check this, we know that that's the at top one because I can see the cord running up there. You obviously could go check that if you wanted to. We're going to label them. So I'll label this one top, and I'll label this one bottom. Great. All right, so those are both activated, and that's not a good thing. So now we want to make sure that when at bottom, that state is true, we activate the bottom keyframe. And when the at top state is true, that we activate the top keyframe. So following that, we're going to go into the addition section, and this is why you have this last part here. The addition section is kind of similar to what we've been doing, but involves one more trigger, and so that's where you see this whole character detected at bottom. So this one right here is another trigger zone that I've just kind of put on the floor, and I've made another square area, but you could really make it anything you wanted. Basically, this zone or switch, whatever you decide to use for it, is to call the elevator back to the bottom when the character is standing there and the elevator is not at the bottom. Therefore, it stops you from getting stuck at the bottom if your elevator is at the top and you fall off. And so once you place down a trigger zone and set it to your call back zone, you can then create another node, and again, this is optional, but it helps with your organization. Change the name of that node to character detected. In this case, I say character detected at bottom. You can say, if you have like a lever that you want to be the switch to call it back, you can just call it call lever or something like that. And so what this is going to do once we plug our other zone into it, in this case right here, what this is going to do, along with the logic that we're about to add, is it's going to add another option for the go down and switch. So just like you can, in this case, trigger it by pressing or by standing on the platform, you're also able to trigger the go down command by standing at the bottom if it's not there. From there, we're actually going to add a few more things. So first, grab a not switch right here. I use a lot of these in my things. I know they're not necessary, but it helps me visually see things. And then you're going to want to create two variable modifiers and another variable. So I'm going to grab a variable right here. I'm going to place it right here. Again, I actually know now there's an easier way to do this with switches, but I think that this is an interesting way to do it just to teach you a little bit more about variables. If you do want an updated one on what the quickest way and the most condensed way I can do this is, feel free to leave a comment down below, but as of right now, I'm just sticking to this. So once you place down these, you're going to change the name of the variable. In this case, I call it recently entered, and this is going to stop your, there we go. This is going to stop your character, and again, change it to 0 and 1. This will stop your character from automatically activating the go down or go up by staying on the elevator, which can be kind of annoying, and that means that essentially when you get to the top or get to the bottom, you have to leave the elevator first before it will activate again. And so recently entered is going to be the name of the variable, so jump into your variable modifiers and go ahead and change the name of this to reference, oh, there's some hopefully spoilers for what's coming next, but change the variable name to recently entered, so both of these are going to be modifying that. And then we're going to create one more not switch right here. Let's see if I can clean this up a little bit. And plug that recently entered switch in there, and attach that not switch to the C of both of our AND switches. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want it so that if it has been recently entered, so if this is number 1, then you will not be able to go up or go down because part C of that AND switch is not active. But the opposite of that is when this is not 1, when recently entered is not true, it's always a qualifying condition for it to move, so it won't affect it if it hasn't been recently entered. So now what we're going to do is take the output of the character detected one, which again is from that zone that is on top of our elevator. We're going to plug that into this not switch, and we're going to plug it into one of the variable modifiers. And then we're going to take the not switch and plug it into the other variable modifier. And then go ahead into the first one here, and this is the one that's going to activate when a character steps on it. And so we want this to basically turn up the recently entered bit. And so I like to do it this way. I set this to 0.1 and then set it to add. And then for the other one, that's going to activate when they leave it, again, when the character is not inside of the elevator zone, we want it to subtract 0.1 over time. And again, make sure that you change the operation type to add and change this to continuous. Actually, I think I forgot to do it for the other one, so let's make sure that's set to continuous. And so what this will do, it means the second that you get on it, it will start the recently entered timer, and the second you get off it, it will kind of remove that recently entered bit. And this will affect this, which is required to set it to go up or go down. And again, this is just to make sure that when you get to the top or get to the bottom, it won't keep moving and you have to jump off first. Now, I want to make a small correction to what I said earlier in the video. Hopefully I can plonk this in there, and then if I do, then you're probably watching this at the right time. And if everything looked similar to this, that means that you're doing it right. The bottom keyframe should be activated, and your at bottom should be at 1, which is on, at top should be at 0, and recently entered should be at 0. That's all the things to double check. And like I said earlier on in the video, make sure that these are all dark, and the only variable modifier that should be active, which is light, is recently entered. And so let's jump in and give it a test. And there we go. You can see that it activates when you step on it, just like this. But it won't activate the second I get to the top because, again, we added all that extra recently entered stuff. So that will stop it from just immediately going back down when you're standing on it, which is a useful feature, but obviously feel free to remove it, and this entire thing will function just as it does. It will just automatically move down when you get to the top. So yeah, that's the easiest way that I figured out how to make this. I dumbed it down a little bit from that other circuit that you saw earlier in the one, and it seems to work just fine. It's nothing fancy, but you can see that it does require a decent bit to actually create a circuit like this that will work in this way. And again, I will actually show this right now because I didn't show it before. If you do, like I said before, jump on it and then jump off or fall or die or something like that, and it reaches the top right there. If you're standing here or if you move into here, either way, it will immediately cause the platform to reset down to the bottom. Now, I don't have this set to reset to the top if you are at the top and the elevator is not there, because I figure that I don't want it that way. If you do want it that way, you could repeat the exact same process. It's pretty easy. Hopefully you can figure it out from that. If anybody does want to do that and I didn't explain that well enough, let me know. But hopefully this gave you at least an intro to a few of these things, or a reminder if you haven't worked a lot with them. It's pretty simple and it's not too difficult to get used to, but this kind of circuit can take a lot of time to make sure that everything works correctly. And so if you are at this section and you're struggling with something that doesn't seem to be quite working right, I'll tell you some of the problems I had. First of all, make sure that all of these variable modifiers, except for the recently entered one, are dark, and that means off. For example, earlier on in this video, you would have seen that I accidentally put it into the operational value, and you want to make sure that all of the power things, anytime I told you to connect something to something, it was into the power switch unless I said otherwise. Because in this case, if they're connected to the variable modifier or the operational value, it will not activate them only then when it's activated. Instead, it will activate it at random times, and I'm not quite sure how it works, but it really messes things up. In addition, I would make sure that you have both timelines. If you have like any sort of stuttering or something like that with your platform, make sure that your up and down timelines, and that's why I told them to make, told you to make them exactly like this, or at least similar with the keyframes. Make sure that these keyframes are identical to the corresponding ones on the other one. So for example, the down animation starts at the top and goes down. So this is the keyframe for at the top. That should be this exact keyframe. If you change them slightly or move it twice to create two separate keyframes, it could cause some stutter. And the same goes for this. This is the at bottom keyframe because it's the end of down, and it should be the exact same keyframe as the beginning of the up animation. And you also want to make sure that those correspond here to these two keyframes and are the exact same keyframe. The only way to do that is to just copy the keyframe. So if you do recreate or modify that keyframe, make sure you replace all the others likewise. And finally, if you do like this, feel free to leave a like down below. I know this is a very long video, but hopefully I can edit it down a little bit. And hopefully you enjoyed this very technical delve into something that I made less complicated than before, but way more complicated than need be. Yeah, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you're all doing well. Talk to you guys in the next video, but for now, have a wonderful day, and goodbye! Bye, everyone! Oh, that was a lot of talking. Exhausted.